Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our summer series. Today, we are going to cover everyone's favorite topic, ESG. Quick introductions. My name is Braxton Huggins. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Datagration. Brian Marlborough, our VP of Platform Development and Commercialization, is joining me today. Brian works closely with the technology, software development, sales, and marketing teams to develop and commercialize solutions in response to customer and market needs, including developing a comprehensive integrated offering for ESG. First, this morning, I'm going to give a quick overview of what we'll be covering today, including the ESG application. Then I'll turn it over to Brian for a live in-depth demo of Petrovisor. And then at the end, we'll answer a few questions and have a few of our SMEs answering questions via the YouTube chat window. So please submit those questions throughout the presentation. So at the highest level, this visual shows you the architecture of the Petrovisor platform. As covered in previous sessions, we have the unified data model, which is the core of Petrovisor. This is where E&P companies are able to close the gap between data, insights, and action. Built on top of the UDM are the data applications. So far this summer, we've covered production optimization, completion optimization, and today we'll be covering elements of the ESG optimization app. These applications enable users to combine complex data analytics, physics-based modeling, and sophisticated economic processes into a single unified view. The ESG app, which is built natively within Petrovisor, gives the teams the ability to reduce emissions with advanced ML and AI trained models. Engineers and asset leads can use climate risk scenario modeling and performance economics as it relates back to their business. And pre-configured dashboards are used to monitor operation trends against goals and build foundations for annual sustainability reporting. Before I turn it over to Brian, can we all agree that managing ESG without technology is not sustainable? Over the next 15 minutes, we are going to discuss how companies can save time and ensure data reliability with automated data capture capabilities. We're going to cover how ESG data accountability is becoming more and more important as we get to asset level economics. And we'll touch on how our ESG app uses repeatable and reusable workflow components that are able to deliver powerful analytics and simplified operational reporting. So with that, Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Braxton, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This really is an exciting time in our industry around ESG. We have the technology now to really reach those goals. And as most of us know, the goals today are set out at the executive level. And then a lot of times comp plans at the executive level are tied to that. It's also an exciting time because technology is really the future of this. A recent report came out by some of the big consulting firms that said 60% of their respondents see current technology in their company as just a patchwork of applications. This is really where Petrovisor shines in bringing together all your data sources to show you on a day-to-day basis what you're seeing on the screen today around tracking emissions. So we'll start with emissions today. We'll dive a little bit into water and we'll touch on social and governance. But what you see here on the screen is really how most companies look at their performance metrics against emissions. And most of the time, this is on a quarterly basis or an annual basis. What you can see I'm doing today is I'm just moving this slider to show you that the data captured via Petrovisor and our ESG app is actually daily data. And the reason we can do that is because we capture the data at the source. All right. So I'm going to jump over and show you that right now before moving back to the overall company performance metrics as you see here. At the source, that is where the majority of our emissions occur. This is both scope 1 and to an extent scope 2 emissions. Primarily looking at scope 1, we're looking at volatiles from methane, but also CO2 and other combustion volatiles. Because we can track at that well site level, we can give information within Petrovisor around consumption, around venting, around fugitive emissions, down to the component level the equipment, the tag ID. This solution is so robust, and it is so because we are tapped into all of the source information via our unified data model. So I'm clicked on one site here, and looking at that site, I can see that there's a compressor and a pressure vessel. Those have emission factors that could be reported via the EPA. So we also have the capability to build EPA calculations within our system so that those reports can be done on the fly. No more manual capturing of data and pulling it together from a multiple disparate systems. We can connect via Petrovisor and do those calculations on the fly. I can then go and look at another site. This is a great example that's showing the emission intensity in a bubble chart. So bubble graphs here showing the larger is more intense than the others. And here's the list of equipment. This now, because it's at the source, we can roll that up and we can take a look at that from an area level, looking at comparing areas and the emission intensity of those areas. So where Petrovisor brings this information in, this information can also be tagged. It can be tagged by the emission types. It could be tagged by the scope. Right? We can look at other ways to tag incoming information as well. Right? So here, what I've done is I've rolled up information at an area level to now compare the average emissions per equipment to the emission intensity for that site. So here we can see that this site way over here to the right actually has a lower intensity relative to the average equipment on that site versus this one up here. All right. So if I click on that, we can then start to look and dive in a little bit deeper to what that reasoning may be behind there. So this allows for that analysis piece as well. So we're looking at all the historical data, but looking at the historical data, we can also look for trends over time to potentially mitigate future emission events, which is really, really the key. To reach those goals, we have to mitigate events before they happen. If we're capturing events that have already occurred, well, we can't reach our goals if they keep occurring. And so that's really the foundation around this operational emission tracking within Petrovisor and our ESG app, is looking at that site level, looking at all the intensities. So bringing in production accounting information, understanding what that is, bringing in things like FLIR camera information, event detection, all of that information that you're capturing as a company, all here in one place. This all rolls up now to a level around the company. So this is really where the executives would want to see, how are we trending over time? What are our goals? Are we reaching those goals? We even have the ability to deploy our applications, our reports, via your own intranet or another URL that you might want dedicated to your employees internal, to see how are you trending as a company. There's even companies out there right now where the entire company's comp plan at the end of the year is tied to reaching these goals. So everybody now has skin in the game in some companies, and it may be moving closer and closer to more and more companies building that in as well. So with this report, just looking at 1 year, I can see the total emissions for that year, and I can also see that I overshot my goal. Right. So at the end of the year, my goal target was 4,500 metric tons. I exceeded that by almost 1,000. Right. You can also scroll back in time to see where may have that occurred. Right. And I can see just by looking at this chart is that from the start of the year, we were overshooting. Right. So that's an important way to look at the information on a daily basis that drives that decision making in the future. All right. Scope 1 intensity, scope 2, and overall, we can build that in. So the nature of how we're tracking this really comes down to looking at material and comparable metrics. This is something the SEC has put into practice in the European Union, and in Canada, the same thing. They're looking for metrics that can be compared from one company to another So what you won't see in our application is anything proprietary to us. We don't have any ranking system. We certainly can bring in other ranking systems, but we intentionally did not build in a ranking system because that's not what the regulators are looking for, and it really doesn't help our customers compared to their peers. Okay. So moving on a little bit deeper, going back to the site level, and I want to then analyze all my compressors. Click here on my compressors. I can see the emission factors of my compressors. I can see my count, and I can see where they're all located relative to their emission intensity as compared to each other. Right. I can do the same thing for flares. I can do the same thing for pumps. Right. What we won't get into today is how we can build in satellite imagery to this as well. Right. That is another webinar that we'll cover, but safe to say you can bring in your layers of emission events as they occur, overlay those on your assets to see, are these emissions yours? Are they appear next door where by the nature of the jet stream, it is just traveling over your site? Having accurate data helps to mitigate those effects of essentially blame for an emission event that did not occur on your site. And so PetroVisor brings that data and brings that proof forward, where if you ever run into that challenge to where there's an emission over your site, you can mitigate those negative effects by proving this was not your site, it was not an emission from your sources. Okay. We also have water set up in a similar manner. So as we look at water management, we're looking at two facets to water management. We're looking at the source side of water, so things that we use in drilling and completions. We're also looking at the produced water side as well. Right? How much are we recycling? Where is this water being drawn from? So things on the source side, we can look at those factors such as, is it groundwater consumption? In the Permian, we use a lot of municipal water. Is this produced water? A big goal of the industry is to reuse as much water as possible. The last thing we want to do is use fresh water or surface water. In some cases, we need to. Right? That is also, we're also able to track that. And we're able to track that down to an intensity level as well. So how many barrels of water or gallons of water per barrel of oil produced or barrel of energy produced are our intensity factors. So this snapshot here gives you both areas of supply and produce side to take a look again at your company metrics and your goals against your actuals on a day-to-day basis. Okay. We can dive in now to look at area level to see I may have different consumption areas and I want to build out and see how are we performing area to area, right? On both the produced side, the freshwater side, the source side, look at intensity over time based on those two factors, look at the different sites. All of this information we currently capture as an industry, I would say 90 to 95% in an Excel spreadsheet. Right? PetroVisor unleashes the value within that spreadsheet by bringing it into an automated system. A lot of companies can choose to continue to use that spreadsheet. That's okay, but now all that information is available within the reporting structure of PetroVisor. And the reporting structure is an important point because all of this data is incoming to PetroVisor. PetroVisor is consolidating this data, it's aggregating this data. But by doing so, we also have a bi-directional API, which means you can push this data out to any other system you choose. You could push this out to third-party reporting systems. You may have a consultant on site who needs data and needs to compile these reports for you. And right now, you may be paying a lot of money and they're charging many, many hours to put these reports together manually. Right? PetroVisor consolidates all that data so that the extraction now can come from a single source. When we look down into details around the water itself, It's similar structure as what we saw for the greenhouse gas reporting earlier, to where I want to compare one location to a next. These locations can be tanks, right? They can be ponds, they can be holding pits, right? We can build in any type of asset and entity well within PetroVisor by connecting to all your sources. So when you want to do an analysis from one site to another, it's as simple as running a report, clicking on any of this information here, and taking a look at things like consumption over time, intensity over time, and comparing one site to another. So what you see here is an out-of-the-box solution, but these can all be customized because all of our operations vary to some degree. And so we have these solutions out of the box, but they are fine to modify, right? We've built these to model after what the majority of the industry is reporting on today. You'll see a lot of themes if you go through sustainability reports. There's a lot of metrics that are very, very common from one company to another. And this is the foundation of how we built the system. Okay. So we also have a social and governance component built into PetroVisor's ESG platform. The social side it changes, let's just say, from company to company. Social is very much an attribute that each company determines how they want to report. So what you see here is a snapshot of some general themes that are in many, many sustainability reports that you'll find. Some of these follow different standards or frameworks. Other companies decide to report on what they think is of value in the areas they operate. That is perfectly okay. PetroVisor can either tap into those systems, which may include your HR, your accounting systems, your HSE systems, definitely, and bring in that information to a central place. Could also be a spreadsheet where maybe you're housing some of this information, and we can bring that in together and we automate that extraction. So on the screen here, we just see things such as motor vehicle incidents that would be coming from your HSE system. Community relations and giving, that may be coming from a combination of accounting and HR. Turnover rate, definitely coming from your HR system. So you can see here on one single screen, we have a snapshot of many, many different source systems, all looking towards the social aspects of what we cover under ESG. Now, there's a lot more that can be covered here, especially on the social side. So we've just decided, for the sake of the webinar, to show one aspect. We are very, very happy, though, to get on another call with anyone who wants a follow-up and really dive deep into these other areas. On the governance side, this information is typically updated quarterly to annually. So as we saw with the greenhouse gas reporting and water, that's really daily metrics. You want to see that information on a day-to-day basis. Social may be month to month or quarter to quarter, whereas governance is more quarter to annual. So again, this is just a snapshot of common details that most companies report on, and this can vary company to company. We can change these visuals, change the information here. What it does, though, in one application, is gives a snapshot of things related to all of the environmental side, all of the social side, and all of the governance side, all here in one app within the PetroVisor platform. So with this, I'm going to answer some questions. We can get into a few more details as these questions come in. And we're happy to share more information and follow-ups and really dive deep. Typically, our demos for this ESG app will last anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half to take a real deep dive with our customers. And we've got a lot of great traction, and we've got customers on board today that are actively using this.
Great, thanks, Brian. So For those that are watching the live stream, if you want to submit your questions and comments in the chat, we'll be sure to address those. Until then, we'll post some questions that we typically get in demo settings. So the first question that we'll address is, what type of frameworks can PetroVisor incorporate into the platform, Brian?
And thanks, Braxton. That's a question that comes up almost all the time, and it's actually quite detailed in that the frameworks such as the TCFD are a system of how we report on data. There's things like SASB as well, which is the Accounting Standards Board, in what type of data needs to be reported in these frameworks. So it's both the how and the what that can be built into PetroVisor. And the way we accomplish this is we tag incoming data. So if you have a SASB requirement, or if you look at any sustainability report, you'll see the columns in the associated SASB framework. So where we can tag incoming data, things like scope 1 emissions. That's a great example, right there on the bottom left of the screen. That's actually a SASB reporting requirement, to where we tag that data, and there's a couple of different data points that we would tag there. One of them would be production, right? Because we're going to look at the emissions versus the production and come up with a simple intensity calculation as well. So this information is then tagged from the source. That is routed through PetroVisor. It creates these visuals. Sometimes there's calculations, and ultimately that data would then be reported in things like an annual sustainability report. The auditable and traceable aspects of that data are key to how PetroVisor is set up. So when you produce a sustainability report, you can actually almost reverse engineer where that data came from, run through essentially an audit trail through PetroVisor to get back to the exact source that data came from, and any associated calculations that ended up producing that data point in your sustainability report. So some of us may have seen that the SEC is really pushing companies and strongly hinting that this data needs to be auditable. And PetroVisor allows for a platform to do so.
So, Brian, you talked a little bit about data sources and data points. One of the other questions that we get quite often is, can I, as an organization, connect my carbon accounting system?
Yeah, and that's another great question. So we aren't a carbon accounting system, but we certainly work with carbon accounting systems. A big one that everyone's probably heard about is Persephone. We have source data. We have operational data. Carbon accounting systems, in order to really deliver the accounting that they need at that level, they also need that source information from the ops teams. So we can connect and push data to those carbon accounting systems very, very easily with our bidirectional API. So it'd be as simple as understanding really the system you have. There's a few out there on the carbon accounting side, understanding what data point is needed, and then setting up the API to have an automated connection so that carbon accounting system can get the data it needs to provide to the enterprise.
Right, thank you. So for those, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming through. Want to encourage everybody to go over to the website, datagration.com. We recently had a press release go out that focuses on some of the work that we've done with Novus Consulting out of Oklahoma, and the work that we're doing with Formentera Partners. And then individuals that are interested in artificial lift, please join us on August 10th for our next live stream. So again, thank you for everybody for joining, and we will talk soon.